This is the Build a Vibrant Culture podcast, your source for the strategies, systems, and smarts you need to turn possibility into purpose. Every week, we dive into dynamic conversations as our host, Nicole Greer, interviews leadership and business experts. They're here to shed light on practical solutions to the challenges of personal and professional development. Now, here's your host, a professional speaker, coach, and consultant, Nicole Greer.
Welcome, everybody, to the Build a Vibrant Culture podcast. My name is Nicole Greer, and they call me the Vibrant Coach, and I have another amazing guest on my show today. I have Dean Foster. Let me read his bio to you. Dean Foster is a world culture trekker. He's been in 100-plus countries and counting, and so for all of you with wanderlust, this is your guy. He's a cross-cultural business expert, author, speaker, and podcast host. He's an intercultural training consultant and founder of DFA Intercultural Global Solutions. That was a lot of syllables in that first part. Living in the 21st century means experiencing cultural complexity every day, allowing it to transform our travel, our work, our holidays, and our relationships. In short, our very being. If we are to become the global citizens we need to be. Dean believes in the power of culture in all of its magnificent, myriad, maddening complexities and its magical opportunity to transform the world. Dean Foster, I'm so glad you're here.
Oh, Nicole, I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you for that introduction.
Yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome. And look what he sent me, everybody. Look at this book.
You.
Are you so proud, Dean?
I am very, very proud of this book. I'm proud of this book really, maybe like even more than I am about my previous books. I've written 5 previous books, and they're all about culture. You know, when you're in India, do this. When you're in China, don't do that. And they all have a business focus. So it's all about how to negotiate, how to run meetings, how to motivate people, how to critique your team, you know, and every country does it a little differently. And they were very how-to specific books. But this one, the big yellow one that you just held up there, the newest one, that one is a little bit different. Business Beyond Borders is really a compilation of my stories about what happened to me when I was in those countries and the real life adventures that taught me something important about the culture that I really didn't know before. Or if I knew it before, I knew it because of my work and the experience of others. But these are the experience that I had. And I just thought it was time to tell that story. Those kinds of stories never made it into the previous books, and it was time to write that book.
Oh, I'm so glad. That's great. Yeah, and so 100-plus countries. So the question probably always you hear is, which one's your favorite?
Oh God, right? They're all interesting, you know, and interesting is an interesting word.
Right.
But it depends, you know, on what am I just going to have fun or am I really doing serious work? I get that question a lot, like which culture are you most comfortable in? Which culture would you never ever want to go back to again?
Okay, yeah, answer all of these.
All of the above? Yeah. If I'm looking for a wonderful weekend, it's Paris. It's Paris.
Oh,
it has to be Paris, right? But look, if I need some downtime on a beach, I've got my favorite Caribbean beach, you know, so I'll think about that. If I have to work in a culture, I want to work in a culture that's stimulating and exciting and fulfilling and engaging for me. And there are a number of them. And there are some cultures that I've had a lot of work in that I wouldn't miss it if I didn't ever go back. And I think the culture for me, for example, that's the most difficult and the most frustrating. And this is purely subjective because other people might find it very, very easy.
Right.
But for me, for a number of different reasons, managing Russian culture is really tough.
Yeah, well, I bet.
Particularly when you're trying to do business there.
Yeah.
And I've had several experiences there representing different clients over the years. I've been doing this for about 35, 40 years. And it never gets any easier. For a number of reasons, you know, we can certainly take a trip down Russian culture lane if we choose to, but that one is a tough one for me. Now, maybe other people have it easy, but
yeah, you call me. You can be on the show. We can get you and Dean together.
Okay.
Yeah. So, which one was the one that was insightful, stimulating, exciting? Which one?
I love working in the Asian cultures. I really truly do. I love going to Japan. I love going to China, Singapore. Southeast Asia is one of my favorite places in the world. Not just personally and for fun and for enjoyment, but even to work there. It's exciting, different enough, always surprising, and very fulfilling.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And the food's not bad, right? It's delicious
Food's
there.
food's great.
I know that's right. I know that's right. Okay, and so just because we have to close the loop, which beach in the Caribbean should we go to?
Well, I have a favorite because we've got a place down in the U.S. Virgin Islands, so I get there whenever I can. And, we love it there. We bought a house there many, many years ago, and we've rebuilt that house through several storms already. But we're still hanging in and enjoying it as much as we can.
Fantastic, fantastic. All right, well, how would you define a culture?
That is so interesting. Culture is how we do things, how we live our lives.
Hmm.
And we are all cultural beings. Yes, we are all biologic beings. We have our DNA. We're all social beings. Mom and dad raised us a certain way, but we're also cultural beings, which means that we have been shaped and formed in how we think, how we believe things should be, our values by our culture. And there's lots of influences here. There's national culture, like if you're born and raised and your formative culture is USA, that's going to have a powerful impact on how you think, what you believe, how you think people should relate with each other, and also how they should do business. If you're born and raised in France, you're going to think in a French way, which is noticeably and definably different in many ways from the American way. And this is true for every culture, some more similar, some very, very different. And so culture is a formative aspect of our lives that defines who we are as human beings.
Yeah, and so in your business travels, you said you've been to Russia several times, all these different places. So really, when we're talking about an organization, there's a culture within the culture.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah.
There's organizational culture,
Yes.
which is how your company works, how your organization works, and that could be very different from how you work. As an individual, we've got lots of different influencing factors. Like I said, how mom and dad raised me, or my DNA, or do I live in a cold place or a warm place? Because that's going to define a lot of different things about me. But in addition to that, there is this organizational culture. And no matter who you are as an individual, when you walk through the doors of your workplace at 8 o'clock in the morning, you have to adjust to the culture of that workplace. The interesting thing for me as a culturalist is that the culture that that workplace has developed in is usually a very, very good reflection of the national culture. So you can bet US dollars that if you're working in Milwaukee for a US company, the organizational culture of that company is going to reflect general American beliefs and ideas and values. Just the way Jacques, growing up in France, may be a unique individual. He may not be typically French, let's say. Mom and dad raised him differently, or his own DNA made him slightly different from the typical French person. But when Jacques walks through the doors of his workplace in Paris every day, he's got to adjust to a culture that is probably reflecting very many French traditional values.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so I immediately went to Emily in Paris. Have you seen this show?
Yes, of course.
And it's all about well, it's not all about the workplace, but a big majority of the show is
Big
about,
part of it.
yeah.
Yeah.
So how accurate is that?
Yeah, well, it's a little stereotypical. I think it is accurate in the sense that organizations generally reflect normative ways of doing things in that place. So they're not far off about the way the organization runs, and that is typically very French in many ways. I think where it goes a little off track is in the individual's behaviors. That's kind of stereotypical and maybe not really the case. with most people,
Yeah.
but it's okay. It's entertaining for sure.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. And the clothes, just watching the clothes.
Yeah,
Hello.
well, it's fashion, right?
That's right. Okay. Well, chapter one, you talk about communicating across cultures. And you say some cultures say exactly what they mean, ouch, and others hide exactly what you need to know, huh? Or the curious case of the missing orange marmalade in, how do you say it, Pondicherry?
That's it.
Did I say it right?
You
Pondicherry,
did.
India. Yeah, I just talked to a colleague about an hour ago, and she's like, "Want to go to India?" And I'm like, "Sure." So I need to know all about India, which I'm sure is so diverse across the whole country, right?
It's massive.
Yeah,
Like you said, Nicole, organizational culture versus national culture. There's also northern culture and southern culture. There's urban culture, rural culture.
yeah,
There's men and women, male and female. There's over 40, there's under 30. You can slice and dice a culture in any number of ways,
that's right.
and you'll come up with different aspects of it. But when you roll it all together, and you have a place like India, it is incredibly diverse. And
Yes,
yet, there are some things about Indian culture everywhere in India that affect all Indian people that you can say are defining aspects of Indian culture as opposed to Australian culture or Kenyan culture or any other country. But you're right in identifying India as an extremely diverse culture. And it's depending on where you are in India, you will see different kinds of behaviors. But that's true in almost all cultures, certainly big, diverse cultures like the US, like Russia, like China, like Brazil,
yeah,
just about everywhere.
yeah. Well, will you tell us about the marmalade?
Ah, the marmalade, the missing marmalade. Yeah. Well, one of the things I wanted to do with all the stories in my book was to emphasize the fact that you don't have to be working in another culture to begin to experience what it's all about. You can sometimes just visit it. You might be just having a very small little experience. You don't have to have a big, mind blowing, earth shaking experience. Culture is all around us and it's in everything. It's in the food we eat, it's in the clothes we wear, it's in the physical expressions that we use. And you see this all the time in even the smallest things, like what happened to me when I walked into a cafe for breakfast at a hotel in Pondicherry, India. And on the menu, I saw croissants and marmalade. And went, wow, I'm in India and I can order a croissant, a
Right, maybe a
French
little
croissant,
leftover British tradition there or something.
you know? And, and what happened to me when I tried to order that croissant in Pondicherry, India? I got an insight into Indian culture that has monumental consequences if you're working there, if you're visiting there, all starting with ordering a croissant with orange marmalade. So you can just get these insights, big, important insights from the smallest of things. And I think that's true everywhere around the world. So I wanted to start the book with that kind of a story, with something so simple, and draw out the immense, massive cultural meaning that that has for anybody who's having to work in India.
Yeah, well, what happened?
Well, you want me to give it away?
Yeah, well, I mean, you've got 100 stories in here. We can give one away, right?
Okay. Yeah, what happened was I tried to order it, and a croissant is not native to India, right? It's a French pastry.
Right.
So I ordered the croissant and it came, but it didn't come with any marmalade. And like jam, jelly, marmalade, and croissant, they all go together.
Yeah.
So the Indian food came for breakfast, but the croissant just came by itself. So I asked the waiter if I could have some marmalade or some jelly, whatever he could spare to go with it. And of course he said yes, and then he would disappear. And then 5 minutes later, I'd have to call him over and I'd ask him where was the marmalade. And he said, "Oh, I'll go get it, sir." And he would disappear again for another 10 minutes. And then I'd have to call him over. And this went on and on and on. And it was obvious to me and my wife, who was sitting with me, that there was no marmalade and it was never going to come. But he couldn't tell me that because of Indian culture and because if he were to do that, he would be remiss in his obligation to serve me as my waiter and to take care of my needs. So rather than tell me that he couldn't do what I wanted him to do, he would do everything he could to avoid answering the question. And this has tremendous impact, because this is a way of communicating in India where you do not want to give bad news to people who you view as your superior. Now, if you're on an Indian team and you're working with a manager, the assumption is that you never tell the manager bad news. You never tell them that you can't do something that they want you to do. Same thing. My waiter couldn't tell me that he couldn't bring me the marmalade, because that would just make it look as if you were not competent in your job.
Right.
And it would also be insulting to the manager, because it would make it look as if the manager didn't know their job. If you ask them for something and you have to go to them, why didn't they think about it and give it to you in the first place? So it's filled with these complexities that, as a US American such as myself, we simply don't grow up with, because it's either yes or no.
Right. It's like 86 the marmalade. We don't have it.
We don't have anything. He brought me ketchup. He brought me butter. He brought me all sorts of Indian spices. But he never said no, and he never said he couldn't. He just didn't. And that has tremendous implications when working with Indian teams, with Indian businesses on a day-to-day basis. You can't ask people to share their feelings or their needs, because their expectation is that if you're the manager, you know what they are. You know what I need. Just tell me what to do and I'll do it. The results can be staggeringly difficult. I remember, and I do mention this in the chapter, many years ago there was an explosion at a chemical plant in India where hundreds of people were killed and thousands of people were injured. And in the court records following the investigation of the explosion, the problem was this was an offshoot of an American company. The American management in the US was never told that there was a problem in the plant, because the Indian workers didn't feel like they needed, it would be insubordinate to tell their managers that there was a problem in the plant. It would make them look like they didn't know what they were doing, and it would make the managers look like they didn't know what they needed. And so there was very little honest communication about this real problem that
if we don't know we have a problem, we can't fix it.
Exactly. And there are strategies for managing this very unique style of communication. And I think at the end of a chapter, I do mention some of the strategies that are involved. But you have to take this seriously, or else you're going to have serious problems around this issue.
Yeah.
It all started with a little dollop of marmalade.
That's right. That's so good. Yeah. So you say there is often a distinction made between what is personally thought and believed and what is expressed. Thoughts and feelings are not overly or immediately revealed. Build in time so people are comfortable revealing the truth to you. So you really got to build relationships, is what I'm reading between the lines. Yes?
That is very, very critical. There are some cultures that run on relationships. It's all about the relationship. It's not about what the policy is or what the procedures are or anything like that. It's all about their sense of obligation to take care of you. And you want to put in the time to taking the time to build that trusting relationship with a key individual who can tell you the truth about what's really going on.
Yeah. And I would say that, that happens in America a little bit, right? So
Sure.
Yeah. But it's very out front in India.
Exactly. When you talk about cultural differences, you're talking about degrees.
Mm-hmm.
You're not talking about things that are totally alien to us.
Yeah.
We all have the capability of acting Indian, American, Brazilian, French, and there are corners of our lives where we are, in fact, communicating that way and acting that way. Definitely. We're all just the same human beings. We're wired the same. So we all have the same capabilities to behave these ways. The difference, and this is where the power of culture comes in, the difference is the degree to which your culture emphasizes one way over another.
Right.
And in India, that emphasis is very powerful on something as simple as how we communicate bad news.
Right.
Like I can't give you the marmalade.
This terrible
While
news.
while in America, if I don't have the marmalade, sorry, it's off the menu today. What else can I bring you?
That's right. That's right. Well, on page 13, you talk about that there are more direct cultures out there and more indirect cultures out there.
Exactly.
Yeah. And so just share a little bit about direct and indirect, just so we're real clear about the difference between the two.
Yeah, there are cultures that, and again, we're all capable of doing this, and in different corners
100%.
of our lives, we do it. I mean, if my wife comes to me and says, "What do you think about this new dress?" If I don't like it, I don't say that. I say it's really nice, right? And maybe a little later I'll say, "I don't know, that color isn't the best on you." But I have to be careful about that. All right. So I'm perfectly capable of speaking indirectly. The difference is that there are some cultures where that kind of indirect speech is exactly the way we talk all the time about everything, even in the workplace. So, a culture that is indirect, that implies meaning, where you have to put in the effort to infer what they really mean. They don't put the true meaning in the words that they use. The true meaning might be in their body expression or in the words that are left out. Cultures like Japan, many Asian cultures speak this way, where it's more important to save face, your own and the person you're speaking with, than say the truth when the truth hurts. But then there are these very direct cultures, like on a world scale, the US, where it's valued to just get your cards out on the table and say what things really are. And if there's some bad news in it, we can deal with it. We're all grown-ups here. And certainly if it has to do with business, the sooner we know about the problem, the better. So then there are cultures that are even more direct speaking than the US. So while it might be difficult for US Americans to understand, let's say, how indirect one must be in Japan, compare how you feel when as a US American you're speaking to your Dutch colleagues, because the Dutch can be extremely direct and very, very matter of fact about what needs to be said. And so the Dutch make US Americans feel the way we make the Japanese feel when we speak with them.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm just thinking about all of the global organizations that are out there. And a lot of the folks listening to our show, Dean, are HR folks. And so they are cross-pollinating with all these different locations across the globe. And so it's really almost like, well, we have the cultures of our countries, we have the organizational culture, and then it's almost like micro cultures all within there. So it's just so fascinating. And I think this is a great list on page 13. All right, so managing the clock across cultures is your next chapter. So what do people think about time, and what are the differences in cultures when they think about managing their day? Now, if we looked at our Emily in Paris, they're having hour and a half wine lunches and all this kind of stuff. Is that the kind of thing you're talking about there?
I am, but it can take very different forms in different places.
Hmm.
The French do it in a certain way. Everybody has, as human beings and as organizations, we have to have a sense of time. What does time mean for us? Is time something that defines us? Does the clock determine what we do and when we do it and with whom we do it? Does the calendar and agendas and deadlines, for example, deadline is an American word. It's a line over which you are dead.
Yeah, I've often thought about that. It's like, gosh, that's harsh.
That's harsh, right?
Yeah.
We have what we culturalists call a very monochronic sense of time, particularly when it comes to business. And again, within this big country of ours, it varies. So there's a little bit more flexibility down south and out west, but there's much stronger time consciousness in the Northeast and in cities versus rural areas, etc. But in general, we're a monochronic culture. We believe in the value of planning, of organizing according to the clock and the calendar and the deadline. But there are lots of other cultures that understand the value, but they just don't do it. And the clock and the calendar is secondary to everything else. So in places like Turkey or Indonesia or many parts of Africa and Latin America, if I'm 10 minutes late or 15 minutes late, in the absence of other reasons to be on time, like if it's my boss, I'll be on time regardless. But if it's a meeting of peers, everybody can show up 5 minutes later, 10 minutes later, 20 minutes later,
Woo,
a half hour later.
woo.
Time is a good idea, but there's always a reason why we do things independent of the clock and the calendar and the agenda. So in this chapter, I talk about how that idea was brought home to me really powerfully when I was suddenly in Cuba, and I wasn't doing work there. I was there to explore Cuban
When
culture.
did you go?
It was New Year's Eve 2018, I think. Don't hold me to the year. I don't have it in front of me.
Yeah, that's okay.
But we went with a group of cultural anthropologists and also people who were very much into Cuban art and Cuban painting. And we were hosted and toured around, and it was quite a magnificent
Oh,
experience.
I'm sure.
But everything was done not according to the clock. First of all, there was an analog clock on the wall in our hotel, and it hadn't worked in years. And that was a metaphor for working in Cuba and in many parts of Latin America, where time is a guide. It is not something that defines and prescribes your behavior.
Yeah, and you got again in the back of the chapter, the less time bound and the more time bound countries. And I love these lists because you can check in and see where you're at, where you're headed, and where you're going to go. So the US, more time bound, less time bound, as you said, Mexico, and then also parts of Africa and let's see, Vietnam. So parts of Asia as well.
Yeah. And again, if you look at a telescopic continental view, you'll see certain similarities, but you see lots of differences as you hone in and get a closer view. And even in Europe, for example, there's this general different sense of time. As you go north in Europe, it gets more time bound. And as you go south in Europe toward the Mediterranean, it gets much more flexible, much less time bound. So following the agenda, following the calendar. If you're doing business in Germany and in Scandinavia, this becomes very important. You don't show up 5 minutes late for a meeting, and you do things on time. And deadlines are serious. But as you cross the Alps and go toward the Mediterranean, it gets very flexible. And the reasons for these differences are legitimate reasons. It often has to do with, goes back centuries to the agriculture and the topography and the climate of these regions. For example, if you're in the north, you have to plan in order to harvest at a certain time, or else you don't have the crop and you'll starve over the winter. But in more moderate and tropical climates, as you go south, or in some cases east and west, if the mangoes are always growing on the trees, and if the crop is always available, then planning and organizing your time is not as critical. And, for centuries, most cultures grew up around these agricultural rhythms.
Yeah.
It's only the last 200 years that we've become non-agricultural and running businesses that have nothing to do with when the plants grow. But prior to that, these rhythms established our values and our beliefs. And if you didn't have to worry about planning forward and thinking forward, then you didn't run your businesses that way. And even today, there is this difference, even though it has nothing to do with when the plants are available.
Right. Well, my husband and I, we went to Argentina, and my husband went on a trip out into the Pampas, and they're like, oh, every day they had a siesta. And he's like, I could really get used to this, and, I've heard that for years, but, it's like, well, we're going to rest because we're going to keep working until very late. I mean, they would hunt until the sun went down.
That's right. And again, that's based on the topography and the climate.
Yeah, it's really hot.
It's really hot midday, and only crazy people go out in the field at midday. So you get up early in the morning, you get out in the fields, you do your work. As soon as it starts to get really hot and close to noontime, you go home You have a nice big lunch with your friends and family, and then you take a rest. And when it starts to cool down later in the afternoon, that's when you go back out in the field and you stay out there. The sun is up late, and then you have a supper, a late dinner, maybe 10 or 11 o'clock at night, just a light dinner. And then that's your schedule. And it all has to do with the topography and the climate.
That's fantastic. Yeah. And so did you go to Havana before it changed?
No. This was most recently. When you say changed.
Well, a friend of mine said we went to Havana before all the fast food restaurants came in and the retail
Oh,
came in and changed everything. And so, I didn't get there. It's a very
I didn't see, no, I didn't see that. I didn't see much of that. There was some of it, but nothing significant.
Yeah.
One of the things about Cuba is that because of the U.S. embargo and other political and economic factors, they're kind of stuck in time.
But that's what he was saying. He's like, before it changes, you got to go.
Yeah, I don't know how soon that would change. I can't predict, but it was fascinating to see. And the point is, there are so many other things that guide us. The clock on the wall and the agenda is the last on the list.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Are you ready to build your vibrant culture? Bring Nicole Greer to speak to your leadership team, conference, or organization to help them with their strategies, systems, and smarts to increase clarity, accountability, energy, and results. Your organization will get lit from within. Email her at nicole@vibrantculture.com and be sure to check out Nicole's TEDx talk at vibrantculture.com.
All right, so chapter 3 is about sharing information across cultures. You say TMI, too much information, changes when you cross borders. Some cultures need a lot, others just a little. Or peeking through the windows of Amsterdam, Brussels, and Paris. So,
Yeah,
sharing information, that's a whole thing. Every place I go, Dean, they're on the Slack, they're on the Outlook, they're on the Teams. I mean, we share information like mad. So,
sure, because we believe that sharing information is a way of gaining power in an organization. If you're the one with the authority, if you're the one with the info, that's really important stuff. And in the workplace, in the US American workplace, you can't share enough information.
right.
And you don't want to be the one behind the eight ball who's accused of not having shared all the information so that people can do their job. The manager is valued in the US precisely as somebody who can broker information as fast as possible to as many people as possible. But that idea is not really shared everywhere. And there are some cultures where the ability to withhold information is power. And where secrets or being the owner of secret information is more powerful than the one who brokers information. And I saw this, and that's what this chapter is about, when I met my friend and colleague Thibaut, who's Belgian, in Brussels one day. And we're walking down a leafy street in Brussels, and he says to me, I can tell you everything about all the people who live behind those windows in these lovely houses. And I said, really, Thibaut? He said, and I know this, he said, just by looking at the windows. And I said, really? Like, how? And he said, well, what do you see when you look at the windows on this side of the street? And I saw a whole row of windows where you could look into the rooms. The light was pouring in. There were no curtains. And he said, now, what do you see when you look at this side of the street? And there were houses on that side where all the curtains were drawn. And of course, you couldn't see in. And I thought, well, maybe that's because of the way the sun comes up. The sun is coming up, so they're drawing the curtains. But his point was that it had to do with the politics and the ethnicity that is a major issue in Belgium, which is that Belgium is really made up of two other macro cultures. In the north, we have the culture that's been heavily influenced by the Dutch. And in the south, we have the culture that's been heavily influenced by the French. The French southern culture is Catholic. The Dutch northern culture is Flemish. It's Protestant. And during the Middle Ages and beyond, these two groups were killing each other because of these differences. They were major cultural
Oh, yeah.
differences that kept these two groups always at each other's throat. And even today, the Flemish speaking Northerners are more urban, more industrial oriented. The Southern speaking French Catholics are more rural. And so he started to draw out all of the different aspects of these two different ways of seeing the world on a street, on just one little street in Brussels, which is the capital of Belgium, and therefore reflects all of these distinct differences. And the northern view, where the curtains were drawn open, was based on the idea that information needs to be shared. Nobody has secrets. Back in the day when we were all fighting over religious differences, you demand access to God, whoever that is for you, directly and individually. And other people who mediate between you and God are unnecessary. So your information and your ability to communicate is direct and personal. But as we go into the French side, it's more Catholic. And here we have to have priests and
That's
intermediaries
right.
standing between you and the man on top. And these people have secret access to authority. And in these cultures, holding on to that information and not sharing it is more powerful than sharing it. And so, how we speak and how much information is expected, even in our daily work with each other, is accessed differently and is valued differently. And this is true all around the world
Yeah.
for various different reasons.
Yeah. And in this chapter, you talk about how this relates to risk. Will you connect that dot for me?
Well, sure, because if you are comfortable making a big decision with just a little bit of information, you're trusting in systems and processes that will help make things happen independent of your abilities. You make a quick decision because you know you can depend on certain things happening. So you don't need to have lots and lots of information. You can have just enough information and feel comfortable about making a big decision. But in other cultures where you hold on to information, you need lots and lots of information. You need the whole encyclopedia just to make a baby step. So that really talks about risk comfort and risk discomfort. And in many cultures, big decisions in the workplace won't be made unless every aspect of the decision can be planned ahead of time. And so we're in a constant state of analysis paralysis, but we're not taking a baby step until every T is crossed and every I is dotted. And then there are these other cultures where if we just have enough information and believe in it and can fix it later, and we have the resources to be able to fix it later if it's not quite right, then we're much more risk comfortable. The US is pretty much on the risk comfortable side worldwide. Let's just do it. We even have an ad campaign, right? Let's just do it.
Right. Those Nike
Uh,
people been milking that thing a
yeah,
long time.
right. Well, it makes a lot of sense that came out of a US American culture. But then there are these other cultures where just doing it is looked at as immature. It's like you haven't looked at all the possible
That's right.
ramifications.
Where's your due diligence?
Exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
And I think of, again, in this case, a really significant difference is France, where the French culture is very much concerned about making sure that everything is as perfect as it can be before we open the curtains. And then if things don't work out, you lose face because why didn't you know that ahead of time? It reflects faulty thinking.
Yeah. That's so interesting. Yeah, and I'm with you. I'm ready to go to Paris. You mentioned Paris. I've been thinking about it ever since you mentioned it, Dean, but I'm trying to listen. But I'll tell you, I went one time in my whole life. How many times have you been to Paris?
Oh, I've lost track.
Oh my
I really
God. How many of y'all want to live Dean's life? I want to be Dean when I grow up.
I've been very fortunate because I've been able to do all of this travel because my clients have sent me to these places. There are lots of places I have never been to.
What do you do when you go see your clients or you go to work for your clients? What is it that you're
Yeah,
up to?
I'm trying to help them work out the cultural issues that have caused a problem for them.
Yeah.
Some of my clients are very wise, and they realized and learned through past experience that they need to understand the culture before they make the problems, before they do something that is problematic, before it causes some issues, because they know that it's costly.
Right.
You've
We can
got to
slow down the sale.
exactly,
Right.
or you can lose your own client
Right. Lose an
to a
opportunity.
competitor who understands the culture. If you don't understand it and they do, you can be sure that the competitor is going to get the business. So some of my clients and more understand before they step into China, they better understand Chinese culture, how Chinese people think, what motivates them, what will solve a problem for them. And it's going to be different from other cultures. But some of my clients have also stepped in and didn't do their work, didn't understand the culture, and find themselves with a problem on their hands. And now, how do we get out of this? How do we fix it? And that's usually when I get the email. And we come in, me and my team, and analyze it and try to fix it for them, come up with some strategies that help solve the problem and make sure it doesn't happen again.
Yeah, that's fantastic. That's fantastic. All right. So, chapter 4 is called Building Those All Important Relationships Across Cultures. Formality or informality? That is the question. So,
This,
what do you want to say?
I was going to say, this is one of my favorite chapters in the book.
Okay, let's talk about what's cool in California ain't correct in Callous. Am I saying that right?
Calais.
Calais. Where's Calais? Teach me.
France.
France again.
Yeah, northern France.
Oh, okay. Tell us. Can you drop that story for us?
Yeah, this is actually about when I returned from traveling in France and doing work there on one of my trips, and I was in California, and the plane landed, and I was cranky and jet lagged, and I wasn't my best. And I get off the plane, and I was really eager to have a SoCal Cobb salad out in the Southern California sunshine and just get off that nasty airplane.
Oh yeah, and get a nice glass of white. Oh, I'm sorry.
Nice glass of white. Yes, of course. And just chill and kind of pull myself together.
Yeah.
But I had just spent 2.5 weeks in Paris with some really big clients, and we're going out and having wonderful French meals every night. And I'm not
Therefore
saying
the salad.
therefore the salad. And that was all wonderful, but it was also very high pressure, and it was work.
Yes.
And work is work is work.
That's right.
And when I got to my seat under a lovely pink umbrella, the waiter comes out, and he's like this 18-year-old kid, and he's absolutely full of Southern California charm. And
hey, dude.
Hey, dude, right. And it's, hi, my name's Zach. How's your day going, man?
Yeah,
you know?
Right.
And I realized that all I wanted was a Parisian waiter who would take care of me in a very professional way.
Yeah.
And so we had this little mini adventure at the table where Zach is trying to tell me how absolutely wonderful life is. And I'm feeling like, Zach, I don't have a knife and a fork to eat my salad. And this would never have happened in Paris. Yeah. And so,
oh no, you'd have 2 forks and several knives and a couple spoons.
I'd be well taken care of, and I wouldn't have to explain myself and open up my personal life to somebody I didn't know, who didn't matter to me at the moment. All I wanted was a Cobb salad.
That's fantastic. Yeah.
So of course, it was wonderful,
Yeah.
and that's exactly what I was looking for. But I didn't realize that I was going to get the whole enchilada, and
Right.
it was going to be so different and so challenging for me, given my mood and my experience of just the past 2.5 weeks.
Right.
And what it reminded me of was the fact that there are some cultures that really require a certain degree of formality because we are perfectionists and we want to do things the right way. And there is a right way and a wrong way to do everything. And that would be French, right? And then there are cultures that value informality, where it's all about lots of other things, but not necessarily a search for perfection. Sometimes all you want is just a cheeseburger, and that's good enough.
That's right. Get it out.
And therefore it raises the whole issue of, are we working in a perfectionist culture, or are we working in a good enough culture?
Mm.
and efficiency versus effectiveness, and formality versus informality.
Yeah, that's so good. That's so good. Yeah, and so at the back of every chapter, y'all, he's got all sorts of tips on how to work through all of these things. And again, to figure out which countries are more formal, which ones are more informal. So I love that. And, we're only up to chapter 4. I think we have time to maybe talk about one more, but I want to tell everybody that the first part of Dean's book is Growing Global, Doing Business Across Cultures, and then part 2, Being Global, Doing Business Beyond Cultures. So let's just tease that little bit. I don't want everybody to miss that. Growing Global, Doing Business Across Cultures, and Being Global, Doing Business Beyond Cultures. What's the difference between those two things?
Yeah, it's a complicated situation, but when I first started doing this work, we're going back, let's say 35 years, there was an awareness. The companies were just starting to work globally. And so they were stepping out there and they were becoming aware of the fact that, whoa, wait a minute, I can't just do things in Calais the way I do them in LA because it's different. It's a different culture. So I have to learn the difference. But in today's world, while we do have these fundamental cultural differences, we also have a greater complexity because back then we were growing global. Today we are global. We're living in a global world. We're not becoming global. And what that really means is that not only are we experiencing these cultural differences every day, no matter who we are, you can be the CEO, you can be the admin, you can be a middle level manager. Even if you never step foot in these cultures, you are going to be working with people who are from these cultures,
100%.
virtually, emails, etc. So we're all global. And one of the things that means is that Ahmed, for example, who was born in Riyadh in Saudi Arabia, he understands Saudi culture. And if you're working with Ahmed and he's still in Riyadh, he's your man to get things done in Saudi because he knows how to do that, even if you don't. But Ahmed, in today's global world, is probably working for your company, and that company has got 60 offices around the world. And every day he's online with his colleagues from 30 different countries. And so it's not about how to understand how to work with one person in Saudi Arabia. It's about how to work in a world where we're all different and yet all the same.
Yeah.
And that's very complicated because Ahmed might have spent his summers at his daddy's flat in London. Ahmed might have gotten his MBA at UCLA in California. And Ahmed is talking to 60 different offices around the world every day, just as you are. So that's really a skill that we all have to understand. Not only do we have to know how to work in Saudi culture if we're working in Saudi, but we also have to understand no matter the culture, what do I need to know in order to be effective in this very complicated global world?
Yeah. And he's got a chapter 17. It says, making an ass of yourself beyond cultures. So
Yeah.
is there a story there? I mean, I'm sure people do make an ass of themselves. I mean, if you've traveled anywhere and you've been in the hotel lobby, there's somebody upset about something and not being patient with the fact that they're not, where they're from, right?
It's not going the way they expect it to go.
Right. Yeah. So do you have a story from chapter 17 about making an ass of yourself beyond cultures? Maybe I bet you didn't make an ass of yourself, but you observed plenty of asses in your day.
Well, I have observed plenty.
And that's not literal, everybody.
Well, for better and for worse.
Right. We're not talking about actual buttocks. Anyways, so do you have a story about that one? Because I love the title of the chapter.
Yes, because I have made an ass of myself.
Okay. All right. Let's hear it.
We can't know every single thing. Cultures are changing, and it's a constant reminder to me that I have to be on my game all the time.
That's right.
Because if I don't understand how things have changed, what I thought I knew about one culture might have changed overnight. right? And so I can't possibly know everything, but I probably know more than most people, and I still
I'm
think
sure.
I'm the best source you can go to, if you need some information. But do I know it all? No. And there have been times where I've made an ass of myself, of course, and I've learned my lesson. And this chapter is about how you recover from that, because we all will make those mistakes. And that's okay if you admit it and if you take responsibility for anyone who might have been hurt by any of your mistakes. And I think this chapter opens with a story of how I humiliated myself and my colleague in front of 500 people
Uh-oh.
by mispronouncing his name in Spanish. I'll let you read the chapter for the details, but
All right, everybody, get your copy.
it was quite embarrassing for me, and I think quite embarrassing for my client. But when I realized the mistake, then I put the engine in gear in terms of how you recover from that, which is admit it and understand that people will be forgiving if you make a mistake because they know you're not of their culture and they know that they may equally be liable of doing the same thing when they're in your culture.
That's right.
So, especially if you can laugh about it. And ultimately we did laugh about it. And ultimately I was saved from having to face all of the possible humiliation that might have happened because this occurred at a presentation that I was making in Mexico City to about 500 people. And in the middle of the presentation, after I made this phenomenal mistake, there was an earthquake. and the earth literally shook under the ground.
Under my feet.
Under my feet, and everyone in the auditorium got out as fast as possible. So I was saved by the power of Deus Ex Machina.
Oh, that's so good. Thank you, Lord. Yeah, that's good. Well, you're telling me you mispronounced. And so I'll tell you something that happened 3 weeks ago, Dean. I got a new client, Subtle and Stolniker CPAs in West Virginia. And I made proposals. I've been sending emails. I've been talking to these folks. They're like, come to West Virginia and help us out. I'm like, okay. So I'm getting all myself ready. And I send out an email real quick. And I stick an H in the name of the company because my maiden name was German and there's an H stuck in everything.
Yes.
And so I didn't think twice about it. And so the CEO sent me a quick note and said, hey, FYI, you spelled the name of the company wrong in your last email. And I was like, oh my goodness. And I did exactly what you said. I went for a walk first. Think about this. And so I went for a walk first, but then I turned around and I'm like, exactly what Dean said. You said, they realized that they could have made this mistake too, but I didn't say that in my email. I just sent an email and it said, I inadvertently stuck an H in the name of the company name. I know details matter, and I just want to let you know that I am sorry, and I recognize that I've made this mistake. And when I got up there, nobody said a word.
That's right.
Nobody ever said a word. And a couple of people emailed me back and said, it happens.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You probably felt worse than anybody.
Oh, I did. I felt just terrible. But I was just moving fast and old habit just snuck in there of how to spell things,
Inevitably, we will do things not intentionally that are wrong.
Yeah.
Wrong for that culture. But it's okay. We see this a lot in body gestures because different gestures with our hands, with our face, with our body have different meanings in different cultures. And the same gesture can have different meanings in different cultures. So you can lose track of that. It's not easy to keep track of that all, especially when you're getting on and off a plane so frequently in these different places. But that's okay. You can say things like, sorry, in my culture, this means something good. I didn't realize it meant something bad in your culture. And everybody understands. Of course, maybe they didn't know how it was in your culture.
That's right. That's right. Well, I can't believe it. We didn't get very far, but we got through 5 chapters of this amazing book. It's Business Beyond Borders, everybody. If you're on the YouTube, take a peek up. Stories, Tales, and Lessons Learned from Working in 100 Cultures Around the World by Dean Foster. I have just been so happy to speak with you. You're delightful. I love your voice. You have a great voice, by the way. You have what I call a nighttime DJ voice. Have you thought about doing that in your spare time?
Maybe I should. But then which culture can I be a nighttime DJ in?
Oh, I don't know. You've got a lot of places to choose from, so that's good. Well, all my listeners are thinking, is there one more nugget, one more thing, one final kind of tie a bow on it thing that Dean might leave us with? Do you have a little piece of advice we could put in our pocket for our last thing?
Yeah, the very last chapter in the book is, I think, 10 top tips for working anywhere around the world.
Yeah.
And it came out of people always asking me, what's the one most important thing I need to know when I'm working in another culture? No specific culture, just any other culture.
Right.
And I think my final word on that is stay humble. Understand you're a guest. Mm-hmm. And if you're doing business there, you're not being paid and you're not going to make your fortune by trying to change them.
That's good.
You're going to succeed by managing the differences effectively. And so if you're there to do business, it's not your job to change them, to make them do things more like the way you want them to do it. It's your job to be effective with the culture that they present to you. And it's their culture. It's not yours. And if you don't like it, then don't be there.
Yeah, but go home.
I think the smarter thing is to try to understand it and then maybe learn from it. Maybe there's something there that has value to you, and therefore stay humble, don't judge, and learn from it.
Yeah,
much better.
That's such good advice. All right, everybody. If we were going to get a hold of you, Dean, if I need help, I've got a company, an organization, an HR department dealing with an issue, and we need an expert to help us navigate some cultural issues across the globe, where would we find you?
DeanFosterGlobal.com. That's my website, and you'll see all my articles and information about my books and lots of fun things about different cultures around the world. So DeanFosterGlobal.com. And you can tune into our podcast, Oops, Your Culture's Showing.
Okay, that's fantastic. All right. Well, thank you, my friend Dean. I am so grateful that you've been on the Build a Vibrant Culture podcast.
Oh, it's been a real pleasure, Nicole. Thank you so much for the invitation.
You're so welcome.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Build a Vibrant Culture podcast. If you found value in today's episode, be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. And if you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to subscribe here and ring that notification bell so you don't miss an episode. Your support helps us grow and reach more like-minded leaders committed to building vibrant cultures. Remember, the journey to building a vibrant culture never stops. Stay inspired, keep nurturing your vibrant culture, and we can't wait to reconnect with you on the next episode of the Build a Vibrant Culture podcast.